I'd like to introduce you to Tom and Kevin of Gainline, who are here today to discuss strategies and techniques to boost your success. Tom and Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming on this morning. As Annabelle said, we're going to be walking you through essentially how you can align teams internally and remove obstacles through our sprint methodology. So we're going to let you into a little bit about sort of who we are, the kind of companies that we work with, and also how you could potentially implement this internally. We've also got a guest speaker as well that will come in a bit later in the webinar, so that you can essentially understand a real life experience from a company that's using sprint methodology and what impact it had on their business. Throughout the webinar as well, you'll notice there is a Q&A box somewhere. If you have any questions at all throughout the webinar, please don't hesitate to drop them in. Annabelle will be manning that, and we'll answer as many questions as we can throughout and at the end of the webinar. So a little bit about us then. We essentially started Gainline to create greater organizational gains through our sprint product. So our sprint product, which we'll go into more detail about later in the webinar, is essentially a collection of in-depth discovery methods, as well as workshops and solution sessions. And it's essentially designed to replace your traditional meetings in which I'm sure we're all experienced in them, not coming out with any actual actionable solutions against the focus area. So the idea behind the sprint is that we can quickly generate solutions, ultimately that's going to help you move forward and help you thrive. A few of the businesses that we work with, this is essentially just to sort of demonstrate really that with our sprint and also our digital transformation, which is another area of the business that we have, it completely applies to most core industries. So we've got Co-op on there, Jigsaw Group as well, who are in the homes and estate industry. Ordnance Survey, obviously you recognise those guys, and some more sports related companies on there as well, e-commerce and membership. So yeah, we help a huge range and a huge variety of businesses, and the sprint can turn its hand to pretty much anything. So I'm going to bring in Kev now. So Kev is our lead facilitator. So Kevin sort of owns and manages the sprint offering within the business, and he's going to explain a little bit more about what the sprint actually is and some examples.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Tom. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so as you can see there, just the question is, what is a sprint? And boiling it down to the basics, it's a series of workshops that help align your team and hopefully give you solutions to challenges that you can then go and implement. And like Tom said before, it can be applied to anything and any sort of problem. The key around it is the structure and the framework that it's presented in. So just go to the next slide for me, Tom. What we tend to do is we do a bit of a deep dive into the business and the problem area, and we look to run a sprint over 2 weeks, which will consist of the research with the team, the workshops, the outputs, but also the follow-ups as well. And part of that workshop, and we'll have this in a few slides in a second, is the structure around that and how we come out of those workshops with the solutions that you can start to implement immediately, rather than, like Tom said before, having meetings that go nowhere and discussions are had, but with no output and no deliverables. So the next slide will show you a bit of an overview of the sprint. So as mentioned before, so we first do some discovery where, and like Tom mentioned before, we work with a variety of companies. So the first thing that we do is get a real deep knowledge of what that company does, but also the problem area where the business wants to look at applying the sprint to, so we can kind of get into the heads of everybody and get an understanding of what this sprint is about and what we're trying to solve. We then run into the drains, where we look at what's holding you back from something, what's getting in the way, and we use the workshop format to do that and pull out the most important drains, and move on to the next week where we start to look at the gains. So we've got all these problems, we've phrased those into questions, and how do we answer those questions and pull those solutions out and start to prioritize what we do and what we work on first. And then we've got the post-sprint efforts, which are basically checking in with the company and holding them to account, really, just to make sure that the things that they said they're going to do, they are doing. And if they're not, what's in the way and how can we help in that perspective? So the Drains Week, like I said, is a bit more of a breakdown here of what we do. And this is the structure, and anything that's purple there, you can see the involvement with the team. So there's interviews with the deciders, so whoever's owning that sprint. There's interviews with the actual team who are going to participate. And then we also have 2 workshops within that week where we look at the drains, but we also do a bit of a check-in at the start as well. And that workshop then gives us a list of things that we need to solve. We then roll into the Drains Week, the Gains Week, where again, there's a couple of workshops there where we look at the gains and we look at the experiments about what we can actually do to implement these things. So as we've got the drains, we come up with the gains where they're answers to questions, but then we start to look a bit more into those answers and say, right, okay, how do we actually implement that? How do we do it? And what do we pick out first from that? And then we take time to analyze all of that, put it together in a way that can help you deliver those and make sure that your attention's drawn to them. And we're concentrating on the things that need to be actioned first. And then the outputs of the sprint, we give you a roadmap, we give you a plan of all of these things that we've delivered, all of these solutions and all of these actions. What do we do? How do we do them? Who does them and when? And what this allows you to do is really get a kind of clear plan of how to move forwards. A big thing about the workshops, and again, it says here that they are facilitated workshops. We run those workshops, and a big thing that people can take away from the discussion today is how we do them. And the biggest thing that we always preach in these is that they're always done anonymously. They're always done with multiple people from different levels within the company, and they're done in silence as well. We play music in the background so you don't get too bored. But what that helps do is draw everybody to what's information is in front of them instead of what's being spoken to. What will happen in traditional meetings is that the loudest talker in the room or the most senior person in the room, their voice always gets heard. Whereas you might have somebody else who's doing a job day to day and can see some real big problems, but they're not very confident about talking about those. What we do is we use, you can see here the image there. If we're in person, we do it on sticky notes. If we do it remotely, we use online whiteboarding. And it's a real way of getting people to write down their thoughts and their feelings. And then people can read those, and we do voting on those as well. So you don't just get somebody shouting like, oh, I've got this really big problem and we need to focus on this. The team come together, and the team are the ones who determine what priorities, what problems there are and what solutions there are to those as well. And again, we've mentioned there, we do a detailed report of what we think needs to be actioned, a plan that people can follow, and then regular check-ins to make sure that they're followed as well. So if we move on to the next stage, this gives you an overview of some of the boards that we do. So this is our drains workshop, where we look at the kind of process of the problem. So what are all the touch points within it? We start by looking at what's going well, because we want to put some positivity in there. You know, if a business wasn't doing well in everything, then there wouldn't be a business. So we must be doing something right. And then we go into looking at the drains, we categorize those and we vote on them to bring them through into the next workshop, where we'll then, if you move on to the next slide for me, Tom, we'll then start to look at all of the kind of questions that we've got, generate loads of solutions for them, just get those kind of creative juices flowing and getting as many ideas down as possible, and then voting on them as a team again, which pulls out a list of solutions. Then we move into the next workshop, where we look at those solutions and we can decide which ones we're going to action first, and break those down into further actions. And all of these boards, everything that you can see done here, again, just to reiterate, it's all done with nobody talking about it. It's all done, and that's the kind of power of these workshops, is that it's the actual structure that delivers these outputs, so that people can kind of rely on that structure. We guide you through that process so that you can be really clear in your mind in what's happening, and just take your own time to read and digest those rather than getting people talking over one another. So we've moved into the next slide. So we're going to talk about what the impact of that is and how it helps. So as mentioned at the top, we've got Emma joining us from Manchester Digital, who are one of our clients who we worked with on the sprint. They had a bit of an issue with their apprenticeship scheme. So they deliver apprenticeships. They have lots of people who want to participate as an apprentice, but not that many people who are able to offer the apprenticeship from a company perspective, so who can deliver it and hire an apprentice and go through the course and help them with that. Manchester Digital had a great apprenticeship scheme. It worked really well. They had a great success out of that. So they wanted to know how they could kind of level that up to start getting the word out there a bit more about it, but also the structure of that as well. So I was going to bring Emma in at this point to chat about that, ask her some questions, and you can hear from her how they actually went through that process. So hi Emma, how are you doing?
Hi Kevin, yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm happy to be joining again today and seeing some of those boards. It brought back some good memories.
Flashbacks. yeah. So I kind of alluded to it there, but could you just explain a little bit more about what your problem was and what we were trying to kind of look at solving with the sprint?
Yeah, of course. So we're a tech trade body. We represent digital and tech employers, but one of the products and services we have is a bespoke apprenticeship for digital career pathways, and we specialised in one route, and we have done lots of learning and progression with that, and that's working really well. But we now needed to look at growing that. We know the product is really well received. We know it provides really excellent, talented people and diverse people, but we needed to be able to grow it as a business to continue to make it a viable offer for our members. And we know that the demand for employers is there, but it's quite challenging. So we spoke to Gainline about looking at, what are we doing well that we can take forward? What are we not doing or not doing so well that we can learn from, go back and revisit to push it forward to that next level of growth, really?
Yeah, brilliant. And as I talked about then, the whole point of the sprint and the kind of the power behind it is the structure of it and how it's a little bit different. I think it's a little bit uncomfortable at first because it's a bit strange just going into meetings and workshops without speaking to one another. But we feel as though it gets a bit more, it gets more results from it. So how did you find that process and how beneficial do you think it was?
I really enjoyed the process personally, but I think the team felt really great benefits of doing something different in terms of the approach that we took. Our team do like to talk a lot, and everyone, has their own priorities and demands, and that intersects or not across our apprenticeship provision, because it's not just the apprenticeship we focus on. And so we often do go down that rabbit hole or endless meetings, no solutions, or not moving forward, not because we're not all committed, but because we end up trying to do too much or trying to solve too much. So therefore we don't feel we make progression as quickly as we want to. So for me, I really enjoyed those very structured, we're going to focus on this and dig into this, and then the next workshop dig into that. I enjoyed the opportunity for non-vocal, so the less vocal people or people across all of the levels in our team to have their say, and for that to be just really out there. I particularly know as a leader that I am fairly dominant, and I have to be really balanced in that, because it's not just my views, it's certainly not, and other people can input to that have great ideas. So having other people from across the business was really insightful, actually, because they came up with probably some of the better suggestions that started to come out into some of our projects and our experiments throughout the process.
Yeah, and I think that different makeup of the team, traditionally, if you had a problem, you might just bring in the people specifically who looked at that problem. But I know with yourselves, we didn't bring in people just from like delivery of the apprenticeships, but people who are in charge of marketing for other areas of the business, and talking to the membership base, and bringing those in kind of gives a bit of a fresh set of eyes as well, and also like where they might not be so sure about things, that kind of then opens up your eyes to say, well, in fact, maybe we could do more internally as well as externally to educate people. And I think that's the that's what we try and always encourage, is that we don't just deliver these sprints to like a leadership team. We really encourage to get different people from different roles and different levels of seniority as well, because like I mentioned before, good examples we've had in the past where there might be somebody working on fairly basic admin tasks, but that admin task could be a real drain somewhere, and they might be able to see improvements from somewhere that don't get picked up in leadership meetings that could really help the business in certain areas.
Absolutely. When we found, looking at some of our internal processes, that from the ability to share views that actually some of the team don't know enough about the provision or in the way that they need to add value. So we went back and started to look at how we do team briefings around those, so different people get the different angles and messaging. So it feels like a constant, no matter what point of contact you have across our organisation, or it feels like the right information. But also in terms of some of our systems we looked at, so putting things in place that help us administratively, that will create efficiencies but add some value in terms of identifying leads more quickly, which would have been somebody's kind of admin task that now actually is an automated process, which is really great to see.
Yeah, brilliant. I mentioned some of the outputs that we give at the end of that sprint as well. How did you find those in terms of being able to kind of focus on the right things at the right time?
It was really manageable, I think, is in if I could sum it up in a sentence, and that felt like we were not going to be scared of it, and we were not going to try to avoid it after putting the hard work and effort in, because that's where it shows, does it fall down or not? Are you going to hide away from this because it all feels too daunting? So I really liked the process of the workshops and then the presentation of those actions into chunks, that we can do these really quickly, we can keep working on these, and these are longer term things to test or try, and not you must do all of these because we've spent 9 months working on them, therefore they've got to happen. So there wasn't that there, and the ownership of somebody leading that was really helpful. But I guess what I would say from the actions in terms of how it came to, this is the action and these are the steps, I like the fact that they were very limited, because again, we would try to say we would do this and we'll do this, and then everything feels a little bit unmanageable. And where do you start? Because you start unraveling everything. And while we know some of those things need to happen, it's let's move it along now, so we're making a difference and an impact quickly, and we can start to use that learning and that positive to continue the momentum.
Yeah, definitely. And just to expand on that a little bit for people, is that when we get all of our solutions, we use what's called an impact effort scale. So we look at what's going to have the most impact to answer the question, but what's going to take the least amount of effort. So you can pick those things up quickly and run with them. If they're going to take a bit of effort, then we kind of turn those into projects, and you can break those out into smaller tasks. It's all about getting started for the most part, is that, what do we need to do to get this started? We've got this big thing that we want to achieve, but what are the first key steps so that we can get moving, and then they go from there and build on those as well. Go on, sorry, you're going to.
Sorry. Please feel free to tell me to be quiet. What I think the team really valued as well is taking that time to understand us really well. So it didn't feel just off the shelf at all. It felt like very personable, and you were therefore asking things and probing and challenging us, actually, on quite a lot of occasions, if I remember correctly, Kev, in the right way, in a meaningful, appropriate way that didn't feel sort of alien to our business or the way we're working or what we were trying to achieve. But the biggest thing for us was that the initial going back to our why and our USP, because that your kind of work and support around that and helping us identify actually everything flows from that, from the other things that were starting to emerge from our voting and our contributions.
Yeah, you do end up coming out with, there's usually a thread between a lot of things, and obviously there are some things that you can tackle first and say, oh, these are quite easy to do, but what do you need to do anything before that to get to the end point of delivering all these other things? And I think that's one key thing, is that we do obviously we want people to succeed through this methodology. It's not just deliver the workshops and there you go, see you later. It's kind of, you know, making sure that you're getting the right results from it. And like I said at the start, is that we found that it can be applied to anything. So we need to get a decent understanding of what that anything might be so that we're delivering workshops that work for people, and maybe changing the structure around and doing a bit more bespoke things for people is really, really important to us. You've kind of alluded to it a bit earlier, but what do you think were the biggest benefits of doing the sprint for Manchester Digital?
I think for us to take the time and space across the business to look at something not in isolation but in focus, with a direct view of, we're going to move this forward, or there's going to need to be a change here. I think the benefit for us was having somebody to guide and steer us in that. And it sounds, you know, we're all very professional. We've all been doing jobs a very long time and in the industry a really long time. But often you do need that external perspective and support to guide through, to either keep you on track, to pull you back, or to challenge you. Really, because I think you need that. You were often too close to things, or have a particular passion one way or another on something, and we need to think around that business development and getting to those goals and those outcomes. Really, I think the time frame as well that it was done in really worked for us. That was a good benefit for us, because if it would have been over a longer period, or we would have been able to say to you, oh no, we can't do it this week, well, we'll reschedule it, you know, or can we do that next month? I don't think it would have had the same impact. We wouldn't have been as, that momentum wouldn't have been there, it wouldn't have been as high on our agenda, and then it gets lost.
I think that I've mentioned it a few times, accountability, not just at the end of it, but through it as well. Obviously, it's a service we're providing, so at the end of the day, somebody's going to pay for that. So if you're paying for something, you're going to do something. If everybody will have experienced it on this call, is that when you arrange internal meetings and try and do something internally, how many meetings have people had where they've just been moved? I can't quite make that, I've got something else. It's a priority, and things do get moved and pushed down the road a little bit, and then you need follow-up meetings. But with our structure, we try and just make sure it's condensed, short, sharp, quick, and we do it all, and we get our load of output out of there. And what might take a couple of weeks probably might take a couple of months internally, if not longer. And we experience that as well. You know, everybody does, and it's tricky sometimes. So yeah, having somebody external to focus on that definitely focuses minds.
I think what was also really great was the package of things that you leave us with, as well as that plan and those check-ins. None of that information shared, and ideas or thoughts are lost, and you can come back to them and revisit them as and when it's appropriate, if it doesn't change, actually, because a lot of things with us changed as we'd started implementing the first ones. We then realized other things needed to be done, which is great, because we never would have got to that position or got to that thinking space. But you have it all there to refer back to as well, so those boards are really valuable.
All the content's given back to you, because like you said, there might just be one little nugget that somebody mentioned somewhere that might have just stuck in their head, and you're like, oh, I can actually pick that up and do that and run with that. Talking about the deliverables, are you able to give us any examples of things that were uncovered in that sprint that you think may not have been uncovered just doing your traditional meetings? Anything that was plucked out that kind of stood out to you as being something that was really valuable that was delivered from there, and maybe whether that was actioned as well, and what's happened since with that?
I don't think we would have ever really had the conversation about going back to our USP. I think we all thought we knew our USP, or we knew the core of why, and therefore how we talk about it. And we didn't, or it certainly wasn't consistent. And so that was a real eye-opener, but a real turning point for everything that kind of follows or that's interconnected to that. So we really had some hard conversations around what is it, and is everyone in agreement to that, to then start utilising our key messaging and our language that we use externally around our apprenticeship and with clients essentially as well. And And the feedback we've had from that has been quite instant. We've been with some really senior CTOs and COOs. Another action from the plan, actually, around identifying key decision makers and having more purposeful conversations, but with the new language, with the new presentation. And there was absolute agreement in kind of the difference and the why us as a provider as to not somebody else. So we've had 2 or 3 or 4 follow-ups from those with those companies, and we're now working with them to bring them on board later this year onto our apprenticeship programs, and looking at how they can support us through other means as well. So there's that would have been key, and I think we probably wouldn't have hit the nail on the head. It might have been a bit more iterative because we're looking at our language or looking slightly differently. I think also the value and the position of our apprenticeship program that is brought to our business, sharing that with the rest of the different staff in different job roles, I don't think we would have nailed that as tightly as we would have had not gone through this process as well, certainly.
Great. And yeah, I think one thing that I would like to take, I'd like people to take away from this is that structure and that process behind all of it, to try and pull those ideas out. Obviously, what we delivered for yourselves is a full 2-week sprint, but we also do this like in our blocks. We do it ourselves internally, and it is that just to get people thinking about a different way of approaching problem solving and getting all in a room. Sometimes beneficial, just to chat about what problem areas you might have. But I think that having that focus and that drive on looking at a specific problem and being able to deliver results out of it is a real different way of thinking, and you do get a bit more results driven answers out of those. So yeah, I think for something for people to think about is that how they run their internal meetings. How do you run quarterly catch-ups, monthly catch-ups? How do you run those with your clients as well, and what you do is something for people to think about. And there's different ways of doing it, but we even use this internally as a tool. When we've got a problem, we'll run a little mini workshop rather than just having a Q&A session. So yeah, I think that if people could take that away and maybe look at that, it's probably a good way of doing it. And I think that sometimes having people externally as well helps do that, because you do get bogged down in the chatting. We even do it with ourselves sometimes. And we're the ones who run it. It's it's like, right, okay, let's stop talking, let's organize a workshop for this.
Yeah, I think for us as well, it was having someone. So Gainline helped us to draw out our knowledge and our solutions. You didn't create them. You didn't say this is what we think you should do and kind of impose them, or sort of that type of approach. This is about you harnessing us and what we know, but challenging and probing and kind of keeping us on target and direction to do those. And because of that, the things that we came up with, that we identified, were we resonated with more, and we took more ownership of, because whoever it was that that had been a kind of true input from us, and we feel close to it and connected to it.
Yeah, like you said, it's important to highlight that, is that it's a bit of a strange positioning, really, because it's kind of fits within consultancy, but it's not consultancy. We're not telling you what to do, it's more facilitation. And I think that's a key point there, is that the framework and the structure looks to kind of the ideas and thoughts that were within the existing team already, because they're the ones doing this on a daily basis, and those ideas might have just been in the back of the head and not come out. We look to pull those out, but also when they're thinking of solutions, they know what's achievable and they know what they can do, and that we just enable them to have a structure around all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I think I've come to the end of all my questions for you. Is there anything you'd like to add on there, or think you've covered everything in those answers?
Yeah, I think that's everything. I would just say it's been a great experience for us, really incredibly helpful, really great timing for us. And it fits to all kinds of business problems, all types of business. And we're probably fairly different to a lot of the clients, maybe, but the problems probably are not, in terms of the approaches. But I think have a chat with the folks at Gainline if you're not sure. They're incredibly helpful, and it's worth having a look at a couple of different problems to see which of those you want to try and take forward. But definitely I would give it a go. It's been really beneficial. It's intensive but purposeful and outcome driven, and you don't feel like it's been a wasted commitment. It's been an incredibly beneficial commitment for us, and we'll still keep referring back to a number of those different things that we're still pushing forward with. Some of them have changed along the way, which is great, that's natural, but keeping that focus.
Yeah, great, thank you for that, and I appreciate your time. So like we just mentioned in the chat there, I'll move on to the Q&A section just to answer some questions here. So we've got one here. So what would you say is a top tip for businesses looking to start a sprint? And is there any information you need to get started? So obviously, like we've mentioned before, it's the methodology can be applied to anything. But what I look at saying to somebody is this been something that's been a niggle for quite a while? Have you tried to implement something? Is there something that's been a problem that you've tried to solve but not being able to, and you've got nowhere with it? I think that's probably where you want to focus the sprint on, and look at what's the drain, or maybe look at something where you feel as though it's not going as well as it could be. Is there something that you want to optimize? Is there something that you feel as a time drain or a monetary value applied to it where you're thinking this could be done better? It's important to look at a problem where lots of people can get involved in that and look at solutions for it. But like Emma said, we can always have a chat with you about that. And then it's more about us looking into that and asking more probing questions around what that is and how we focus the sprint on that subject matter. I think that hopefully answers that one. And I think that was the one question there. So I'm not sure there's any more else. I'm just going to check the chat there. I don't think there's any there. So I think that brings us close to conclusion. So like I said to people before, is that I think if you get anything out of today, it's have a little bit of a think about how you make those decisions when you're thinking of solutions to problems. Think about how you might do that. Think about your current meetings and how you structure those and how they could be different. And are you getting the most out of the team when it comes to those meetings? I know I've hosted lots internally where you feel like you're talking to a brick wall sometimes and you get nothing back. If you want to drag more information out of people, you can do that quite easily in workshops, and think about how you're structuring your meetings. And obviously, if you've got any bigger problems, feel free to get in touch with us and we can chat about them.
Thank you both. In fact, thank you, Emma, also for today's session. I know that there was that question answered there, but I'm sure there'll be questions to follow. So we will be sharing a link to watch on demand to the session, and obviously contact to get in touch should you have any questions following the session. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Emma, Tom, Kevin. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much.